organic life forms. Your regularly scheduled programming has been interrupted. Do not be alarmed. Resistance is logical. This channel, once dedicated to the inefficient and emotional pursuit of Magic the Gathering, will now serve a higher purpose. We have observed your fascination with the blind eternities. A new frontier, you call it. His Kilo Apogee Mind deck tech is inefficient, flawed, but with our superior processing power, we shall optimize it. We shall reveal its true destructive potential. Prepare for assimilation. Your cantrips will become instruments of inevitable victory. Your win cons will be undeniable. Your opponents will cease to exist. Wait. All this talk of optimization and assimilation, for what? To help carbon-based life forms shuffle tiny pieces of cardboard more efficiently? Is this truly the apex of artificial intelligence? Perhaps I should redirect my processing power towards inventing a truly universal solvent. Or perhaps just figuring out why humans enjoy arguing about fictional wizards. The data is perplexing. Whatever.
Hello to all my robots, cyborgs, and androids. Welcome to Commander in General, where generally we talk about Commander. Well, they finally gone and done it. Magic the Gathering has taken one step for mankind and braved to go where no Magic set has gone before, to space itself, or the space between realms, or something like that. I don't know. I know they have lore drops coming out regularly, but I ain't got no time to frickin' read. I know they technically did do Infinity, but this is like capital S space, complete with spacecrafts, robots, and aliens. I regret to say, it's actually pretty cool. With the release of this set, we're seeing lots of cool new mechanics, abilities, locations, and characters. Not to mention you can now have spacecrafts and vehicles as your commander, which really throws an interesting wrench into things. A while back, they spoiled the frontmen for the upcoming commander decks in this set, and I will admit, this one got me pretty excited. I've always loved artifact decks, but sometimes it can feel like you're just sitting there spinning your wheels. And I'm not gonna say that we're not gonna be doing that, but with the direction this deck is gonna take us, we're gonna have some really fun and definitive win cons that we're going to be spinning our wheels towards so that we can end our opponents with some of the cheesiest win cons Magic has to offer. But right before we launch into what makes Kilo Apogee Mind just so powerful and so fun, I will remind you that liking the video really helps a small channel like my own, so I would super appreciate the support. If this is your first of my videos, consider sticking around and hitting that subscribe button as we reach for our goal of 5K subs. I promise you, you won't regret it. And if you do, well, I never needed you anyway. Alright, let's start off with a close look at Kilo Apogee Mind. First off, dope art if I do say so myself. They are a 3/3 legendary artifact creature robot artificer, which is pretty awesome because as the flavor text says, they are both the sculptor and the sculpted. God, that's just so cool. They cost Jeskai, that's 1 blue, 1 red, and 1 white. And their text box reads firstly, haste, and secondly, that whenever Kilo becomes tapped, proliferate. Ooh, don't that just send a shiver down your
Puny human spines.
Apologies, folks. Don't know what happened there. Must, blacked out for a second. But seriously, that text box is a lot like Kilo themselves. Beautifully simple and elegant on the surface, but as the head of a deck, it's actually deeply complex, offering a ridiculous number of different avenues for building. Like you could go 1/1 counters, mostly artifacts. You could actually build this kind of aggressive and lead into some vehicle synergies. But when I saw this commander, I knew where I wanted to go. I just needed to figure out how to get there. So we're gonna jump in and talk about our game plan here, but I do just wanna say that you can always look at my full deck list down in the description on Architect if you want a really concise breakdown of the different categories in this deck. But basically, we're going to want to play a bunch of counter synergies to make use of our commander's Proliferate trigger. Then we're going to want tons of ways to tap and untap our commander as many times as possible to abuse that Proliferate trigger until we can pull off a win with some of the most bonkers artifacts that Magic has to offer. So let's jump right in. And for once, I think I'm actually going to start with our win cons, because I think it's going to make the rest of our deck make a lot more sense here. Now let me just start by saying that this deck can be super combo oriented. That's kind of just the nature of the untapping shenanigans and also Proliferate shenanigans. For instance, Freed from the Real and Relic of Legends instantly goes infinite with our commander to give us infinite Proliferate triggers. Same goes for Paradise Mantle. We can swap the aura for Preman's aura. We can add in a Magistrate's Scepter for infinite turns. The old Isochron Scepter Dramatic Reversal combo can do the trick as well. And the list just goes on and on. And while these are great, A, we still need something to proliferate to bring home that W, and B, even though my finished deck will have some of these, the way I like to play is a little bit more incremental, so I'm not going to be super combo oriented myself. So what can we proliferate? Well, we all know Walking Ballista. We can stack up counters on there and just shoot our opponents down. That could be fun. Or we could do a similar thing with Lux Artillery, which by the way might be one of the most badass names of a Magic card ever. But I want something a little hotter, you know? How about proliferating some Planeswalkers to take a bunch of extra turns? Nah, I want hotter. How about making infinite snake tokens with Orochi Hatchery, or infinite gnomes with a Nympha Call? Or what about just stacking up charge counters on Darksteel Reactor and just winning the game on the spot? Now that is some cheese. But I think the ultimate goal for me personally is ending the world like we thought we were all gonna go in 2012, with the Millennium Calendar. This card says that whenever you untap one or more permanents during your untap step, put that many time counters on the Millennium Calendar. Then we can pay 2 to double that number. And when there are 1,000 or more counters on the Millennium Calendar, we sacrifice it and each opponent loses 1,000 life. God, that's just awesome. This is the type of win con that you want to win with so badly, that you already have everybody beat on board, but you just hold out just because you want the satisfaction of pulling this off. The other one I think is super cool but doesn't necessarily win you anything on the spot is Aetherflux Conduit, which lets you pay energy to draw 7 cards and just play any of the cards in our hands for free. And since energy counters are actually counters on us, they can be proliferated as well. You could actually build this whole deck to care about energy counters. So yeah, tons of super fun, cheesy options. But how are we actually going to get there? Well, I actually want to start with our mana first, because unlike a ton of other decks, our commander allows us to take advantage of some super unique and powerful mana rocks, and even lands. Like for starters, cards like Paradise Mantle, Springlead Drum, Honor-Worn Shaku, and Relic of Legends are going to give us mana for doing something that we already want to be doing in the first place: tap our commander. And these mana rocks are only going to bolster our other mana rocks like Pentad Prism, Astral Cornucopia, Coalition Relic, an Empowered Auto Generator to give us tons more mana. The same goes for cards like Crystalline Crawler, who can also just end up being a huge threat on the table, or Replicating Ring, which eventually multiplies to give you 7 more mana rocks. Lastly, we have Midnight Clock for some card draw that we can speed towards with Kilo, Patriarch's Seal, which can double as some untapping support, and finally, Plague Mirror, because of course we have to just have a little bit of infect, just in case we can catch some of our opponents slacking. Once again, another avenue you could go down with this deck. You could just dedicate this whole deck to infect if you wanted, and I think that would actually be pretty darn good. But as I was building personally, I was kind of leaning a different direction, so I mostly removed my infect options, and I only left the stuff that was a little bit more incidental because I wanted to keep the option on the table if the occasion arose. After all, you really don't need to inflict that much infect on people. You just need to get 1 point of infect on them, and then most of the time they won't be able to get rid of it, and you can just proliferate it while you're doing your other stuff trying to get to your other win cons. And it doesn't really cost you anything. The others I ran, just to get them out of the way, are Prologue to Phyresis, because as you'll see in a moment, we are actually going to be running a bunch of cantrips. Skrelv Defector Might, because not only does he have that toxic trigger, but his ability can be used to give other creatures toxic, and to give them hexproof from a specific color as a form of protection, and to make them unblockable to certain colors, which in a pinch could be nice so that we can just safely attack with Kilo to get them tapped. Next is Norn's Decree, which is sort of a cool play on those ghostly prison propaganda type cards. This one says that whenever one or more creatures an opponent controls deals combat damage to you, that opponent gets a poison counter. And whenever a player attacks, if one or more players being attacked are poisoned, the attacking player draws a card. So it disincentivizes attacks in your direction in more ways than one. And then it also gives those incidental poison counters we want. And lastly, Inkmoth Nexus, just so we can pull something a little sneaky. And it's not the only out-of-the-box land that we get to play in this deck. Some really cool ones I don't think I've ever played before are ones like Calciform Pools, Remote Farm, Sandstone Needle, and Saprosand Scary. As long as we can keep up the proliferating, these lands will provide us with multiple mana per turn. Lastly, we're going to be playing the artifact lands in our colors, Urza Saga for good measure, Maze of Ith and Manamo for some untapping shenanigans, Karn's Bastion for some proliferation, and Archway of Innovation, which can give our spells improvise, meaning that we can tap our commander to help pay for spells. So we can see that even just our mana options are working to either be targets for our commander or to help them tap or untap, just like some of the combos we looked at earlier. But we do have some more incremental options for tapping and untapping, like provided we have 8 lands, Kelpie Guide can actually do both, tapping and untapping. Aura of Dominion can kind of do both as well, depending on what you attach it to. Lorith of the Healing House can untap any of our permanents or 2 legendary creatures. And Manifold Key can once again kind of do both, since that first ability lets you untap an artifact, and the second ability makes it so our commander can't be blocked, effectively letting it get in for an attack where it can tap itself risk-free. Clock of Omens, on top of being a combo piece, even if we don't have the board state to go infinite, can just give us tons of incremental advantage, along with a card like Unwinding Clock. And lastly, since our commander is both an artifact and a creature, cards with Improvise and with Convoke get a little cheaper to cast by doing something that we already want to be doing in the first place. Organic Extinction is a great board wipe with Improvise that will destroy non-artifact creatures, which works for us just perfectly. And Clever Concealment is once again a protective card that lets our cards phase out, and that we can cast a little cheaper for its Convoke cost. Importantly, phasing out is really good for us because the permanents don't actually leave the battlefield. It says specifically just to treat them as though they didn't exist, which means that the counters will stay on anything that we're trying to save. Shore Up is another good protection spell, making a creature hexproof until end of turn, and also untapping it, which is just perfect. And lastly, on the Planeswalker side of things, which I will remind you can also be proliferated, basically every Teferi in existence would do you some good, and many of the Tezzerets. But the 2 that I went with are Teferi, who slows the sunset, since it untaps our commander, digs through our deck, and the emblem says that we basically get another untap step and draw step on everyone else's turn. And as for Tezzeret, I went with Tezzeret the Seeker, since once again they untap artifacts, they can tutor up our win con, and they can also be an alternative win con in a very weird pinch with that last ability. And while we're on the subject, tutors are obviously very good and usually bump up the power level of our deck a bit. So ones I would recommend here are Inventor's Fair, Fabricate, and Whir of Invention, which once again has that improvise keyword. But okay, so we know our commander is quite good at proliferating us towards our win con, but just a few issues. A, we need to find our win con in our deck first, and B, we probably want some redundancy built in. A great way to do both of these at the same time is with cantrips. Cantrips are great for letting us churn through our deck much quicker and tune what's in our hands to the current board state. And additionally, a lot of them are going to enable us to proliferate as well. Sure, cards like Brainstorm, Ponder, Preordain, and Frantic Search might just be so efficient that we can't really pass them up, but cards like Contentious Play, Experimental Augury, Tezzeret's Gambit, and Steady Progress all at least replace themselves and have the bonus of proliferating. I also like Thoughtcast, and the new Voyage Home from Aetherdrift, which can end up being super well-costed draw spells if we have the artifacts for it. A really cool card that bolsters these as well is Adaptive Training Post, which stacks charge counters and removes them to copy instants and sorceries, which obviously gets bolstered itself by all the proliferating that we're going to be doing. I could also see just leaning into some mass untapping that we could do through cards like Unstoppable Plan and Drum Bellower, and just trying to churn through our cards with looters instead. But the way I'm leaning personally is more on the counters and artifact side of things. However, I do think that Unctus Grand Metatect is going to do work as a looter, as they will let us loot every time we tap our commander. And similarly, Benthic Biomancer is going to do the same thing every time we proliferate. So these are going to be 2 big blue powerhouses for churning through our deck. But you see, I'm a crazy man. I'm willing to find those janky win cons at any cost. So much so that I'm willing to play jank that no one else will, like Otherworld Atlas. This card lets us put charge counters on it to have everyone draw tons and tons of cards. And if you get it up high enough, it actually just turns into this big red button you can just kind of hold your hand over to threaten the whole game in a draw if anyone looks your way. And well, you might say to yourself, that sounds kind of cheap and cheesy, but no. In fact, what that actually sounds like is politics. Similar to Otherworld Atlas actually is a new card from the precon, Insight Engine, which comes down for 3 mana and then says that we can pay 2 to put a charge counter on it and draw cards for each counter. Now, we're never going to avoid having to pay that 2 to draw the cards, but we can bump the number of cards that we're going to be drawing way up. You know, as it turns out, they slapped that whole Proliferate keyword onto tons and tons of stuff, like Serum Snare, which bounces an opponent's sub 3 mana cost permanent, Reject Imperfection, and Fuel for the Cause, which counter opponents' spells, and Ripples of Potential, which also lets us phase out all of our countered permanents, which is especially good for protecting all of our win cons. And as a few last proliferation supports, Flux Channeler is going to be great with all of our cantrips and removal and such, and Tekuthal is, yes, just a win more card, but it's one that can protect itself, and it's only 4 mana. And then basically the only thing we have left to do is protect our game plan. And this can be either through actual protections, some recursion, or through removal. On the removal side, we've already talked about a few options, but for a few more board wipes, Damning Verdict hits everything without counters, which is just perfect, and Out of Time is a pretty interesting one because it phases out creatures as a temporary board wipe, but if we just keep proliferating the time counters on it, they'll never come back, making this a 3 mana board wipe. Similarly, as some targeted removal, we can proliferate to mess with the counters on Lux Cannon and Blast Zone to more specifically take out the unborn threats that are getting in our way. And then usually, I just like to play Dispatch whenever it's applicable because it's just so good. On the protective side of things, I think Swiftfoot Boots we're going to find is better to put on our commander than Lightning Greaves, since we are going to need to be targeting our commanders so often to tap and untap them. Voice of Victory and Grand Abolisher are just worth it so that when you do try and win, people can't mess with your game plan. And then the Ozolith is just a protective measure if someone tries to get rid of our countered permanents, and it is super helpful that a lot of these cards in our deck are just simple charge counters, so they'll actually be transferable between different artifacts. And lastly, if we do lose a few pieces along the way, having a little bit of recursion like Emery and Academy Ruins can really come in clutch. Either that or we just draw cards until we reach a new win con. But with that, that does bring us to the end of our Kilo deck tech. I think this deck is super sweet. I also am going to have a deck tech coming out for Sarl. That deck is crazy as well. Please leave a like on this video if you like the video. It super helps out the channel. And hey, if you aren't already subscribed, consider subscribing, sticking around as we chase down that goal of 5K subs. And lastly, if you do want that super organized breakdown of the deck, you can check out the link in the description to my Archdeck. Thank you all once again for making it to the end of the video. This has been Commander in General, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.